Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us a very special guest, Amitabh Kant, Secretary DIPB, who, more important than that, has been leading the Make in India campaign for this government. As you know, Make in India is a single biggest reform item on the Modi government's agenda. It has many dimensions. It has 25 ministries feeding into Mr. Amitabh Kant's department to coordinate the Make in India process, and to discuss that we have him with us today. Very welcome to our show, Mr. Amitabh Kant. You have big responsibility on your shoulders. It's been a year and more, and tell us a few things about how Make in India so far has worked, because it has so many dimensions.
Well, first and foremost, it's important that we have manufacturing as a very key driver of India's growth. India cannot grow at rates of 9 to 10% per annum for 3 decades or more till manufacturing doesn't grow at rapid rates. All countries in the world have grown on the back of manufacturing, and therefore if jobs have to be created, then manufacturing has to be a key driver. So I think Make in India is very, very critical, very significant for India's growth.
To take manufacturing share of GDP also
Absolutely, and to create jobs, growth with equity. I think Make in India is very, very critical. So I think one of the key things is being that we make India a very easy place and a very simple place to do business. Over the years, we've made India a very complex, a very complicated, a very difficult place to do business. And the focus of the Prime Minister has been to make India an extremely easy and simple place. So we've been, in the last 8 or 9 months,
cutting through red tape.
Just cutting through a whole lot of paperwork, procedures, rules, regulation, acts. And we've ruthlessly been at it, not merely in the central government, but in the state
governments
also. So in the central government, we've created an e-biz platform where we have one single paper, one single point of clearance, one single point of payment, so that, there is complete ease of doing business. We've been able to put 14 services together. We intend to put 26 in all. This is work in progress, but we'll integrate all the states also onto this process. And more than the central government, I think we've really pushed the state governments. We've created 98 points. We are evaluating the states against these timelines. By August, mid-August, we'll have the ranking of the states, saying which are the best performing states, which are the worst performing states. So I think a huge level of competitive spirit among states to cut out red tape. And I think this has been one singular achievement of this government in terms of moving forward and making...
So in terms of ease of doing business, India has been pretty poorly ranked in the World Bank pecking order. We are 142nd.
That's right.
And our aim is to bring India down to what, under 50?
So the Prime Minister has given us this task.
Is there any change in that ranking? Is it happening? Yeah.
So India has been going down steadily. Last year it was 142nd. The task which the Prime Minister has given us is to make India, bring it in the top 50 in the next 3 years. And we are very, very confident that we'll push India into achieving this.
What is it that makes us 142nd so far at the bottom among 190 odd countries? I mean, what are the 2-3 key issues? What are the low-hanging fruits? Please tell us.
So first and foremost, I think starting a business, starting construction, getting electricity. There are 9 different parameters on which they evaluate, but we fare extremely poorly in insolvency, in easy entry, easy exit. We fare extremely poorly in enforcement of contracts. We are 186 out of 189 in enforcement of contracts.
Why is it so?
In India, it takes almost about 1200 days to get a court matter settled. That means it takes you almost over 3.5–4 years. It takes 42% of the commercial contract money goes to advocates. Simply too many adjournments. So I think India's improvement is not merely a function of what the ministries do, what the states do.
The judiciary has a big role.
Absolutely. The judiciary has a big role. I think very easy insolvency processes, easy entry,
But
easy
we've
exit.
had an insolvency law for a while, no? Sarfazi Act, etc.
We have Sarfazi law, but I think we need to make many more radical changes, which are presently in the offing. Vishwanathan Committee is giving its report, and I think we should see this through this year. So my view is that reaching 50 is doable. India will have to push itself very hard. This will have to be a national challenge. Every single ministry has to be aligned to this process, this task. So ease of doing business has been one key thing. Secondly, I think one of the important thing is that if you want to be a manufacturing nation, India has to be a very important, critical component part of the global supply chain.
The value chain, we must
Absolutely.
be, yeah.
Absolutely. You can't isolate yourself and say that you want to be a manufacturing nation. It's not feasible in today's world. So you have to be an integral part of the global supply chain. And I think what India has done in last 1 year,
Like China or Taiwan
Exactly.
or South Korea.
exactly.
Right?
So some components will have to be made here, and for that India needs to open up its economy, and that is what it has done in the last 1 year. It has opened up vigorously in the defense sector, in the construction sector, insurance, pension fund, medical devices, just about everything we've opened up. So India is one of the most open economies, other than multi-brand retail. India is one of the most open economies of the world. And what we've seen.
Are you opening up further? One reads in the newspaper that you're further liberalizing
I think
the foreign investment limits.
No, we've liberalized heavily. I think India today is the most open economy of the world. And any further suggestions that your viewers may have in terms of opening up, we'll be very happy to accept those. But one must understand that India's FDI has grown. Since the launch of the Make in India initiative, FDI inflows into India have grown by a whopping 48%. And this growth of 48% has happened at a time when global FDI has fallen by global FDI inflows have fallen by 16%.
But I noticed, Mr. Kant, that I read this 48%. The biggest growth is in services, I've noticed. The component, if you just deconstruct.
We've done the breakup analysis. It's grown a lot in manufacturing sectors as well. Services, of course, it's grown. But manufacturing, the important thing is that manufacturing has also grown. So I think it's grown in a large number of sectors. And the good thing is that FDI has grown at a point of time when there's been a global slowdown. So to my mind, India has demonstrated that it has the ability to attract FDIs.
It's interesting you talk about India becoming part of a global value chain, an integral part of global value chain. Now, in this regard, recently ICRIER, a think tank, had done a study, and it was done by Dr. Anwarul Hoda, a former Special Secretary in the Commerce Ministry and India's Deputy Director General at WTO. And his study showed, Mr. Kant, that India is not part of the global value chain because of its high local tax regime, number one, and number two, bad infrastructure. From the time that goods land at Indian ports and they reach the factory to value add and then further to be shipped out for exports. He says that an equivalent of 7% of import duty gets added to the cost because of bad roads, bad turnaround time at the ports. Now, are you addressing these problems? I mean, because these are very critical to costs, and global guys don't come until these costs are taken care of. And in that context, GST is very important because our local taxes are among the highest in the world. So how are you looking at these problems?
I think these are very valid points that have been made. I think the important thing is that the logistic costs in India are amongst the highest in the world. And they are the highest in the world because, one, there is deficient infrastructure. So we need to add infrastructure, and there's anything which India needs to do is to just do infrastructure. And we need to focus on implementation in a very big way on infrastructure.
And the tax regime?
I'll come to that, but let me just focus on infrastructure. I think there is a big initiative right now presently on in infrastructure, not merely on the roadside, but in terms of radically improving our freight corridors, in terms of the dedicated freight corridors, which by 2017 will link up our hinterlands to the ports, and
That will reduce the cost.
that will radically reduce, because it takes 13-14 days for goods produced in the northern part of India to reach the ports. They will reach within 13-14 hours. So that will radically reduce, plus the development of new manufacturing cities. So the size and scale of manufacturing will radically change with these new manufacturing zones.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, I think there's a huge focus on improving the turnaround time at our ports. We've, on our side, cut down heavily in terms of the number of processes, the number of paperwork. For instance, on
But it
import,
still takes about 5-6 days in India,
for
right?
instance, import and export required 11 forms to be filled up. This government has brought them down to just 3 forms. So I think things were on the right direction. We just need to push them harder. That's one. In terms of infrastructure. But infrastructure, by 2017, 2018, I expect India to become a highly efficient place as far as logistic movement is concerned, with freight corridors, with large logistic hubs coming into India. Secondly is this issue of taxation, and I think it's important that India pushes the GST, and there is a need for vigorously pushing this through to make India a far more easier place and have one common market and GST at the right price points, at the right tax points. And I think if these two things happen, then India is heading for a better logistic movement, far more efficient turnaround time. Third thing, which is very important to understand, is that the world is moving towards large trading blocks. I mean, whether it is Trans-Pacific, Transatlantic, the regional blocks, and India needs to aggressively negotiate and become an integral part of these trading blocks.
At the
on
moment,
a win-win.
India is not part of any really big trading
Exactly.
bloc.
And the way the world is growing, if you're not a part, you've lost it out. And therefore, India has to aggressively become a key participant and necessarily raise your standards, raise your intellectual property regime. And therefore, then you gain out of these trading blocks. You can't isolate yourself and then say that I want to be a global player. It is not feasible. Our manufacturers will lose out. Our exporters will lose out. India must play this aggressive game, and which is what exactly it is aiming to do.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned GST. Now, do you think a GST which starts at 25% is good enough? Because a lot of analysts say that any single goods and services tax above 18%, which is what now the opposition party is saying, will not be helpful. Because the total taxes today, if you total up all the local taxes, work out about 29%. And if your GST is just 25, that means you've kept petroleum out of it, liquor out of it, and a lot of other, which states do not want to give up their independent taxation on those sectors. Then does it make sense to start with a GST of 25%?
You know, it's been a very, very difficult process for the government to navigate through this GST.
You have to get the states on the board.
It's important. I mean, it's better to have a GST
And then-
rather than not have a GST.
We'll take a small break here. Please don't go and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a very interesting conversation with Mr. Amitabh Kant, who's leading the Make in India campaign for this government. So, Mr. Kant, you're also coordinating with, as you said, 25 other ministries. You're coordinating with the state governments. What is the response? Are state governments are they assimilating the importance of this this whole project, and do they see the benefits flowing? Are projects coming up? Any big projects that you've seen the last 6 months?
Well, I see a huge amount of competitive spirit amongst the states. We've pushed this reform agenda of ease of doing business amongst the states. And I've seen states really working hard. I mean, even states like West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, they've really tried to work hard. And I think you will see the benefits
Is land
of this.
acquisition a problem at the moment?
You will see several benefits of this.
Interestingly, recently Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi and Finance Minister Mr. Jaitley have said that because of this competitive spirit among states, or to further foster this competitive spirit, maybe the states can look at bringing their own amendments specific to their needs on land acquisition. Do you think that makes sense?
See, India needs to amend the present Land Acquisition Act. It's highly complex. It's extremely tedious. It's, to my mind, too complex. It's not in favor of the farmers. It's not in favor of industry. It's extremely bureaucratic in nature, and it has too many committees, and to constitute these committees and move forward is a 6 to 7 years time frame.
There's too much bureaucracy introduced into the framework of the law, is it?
It lacks a certain level of clarity as far as implementation is concerned. So India needs to move forward if it needs to create world-class infrastructure. And India needs to do it, and every single country of the world has done it at this stage of its growth and development. You need land for drainage, for sewage, for solid waste, for transportation, for providing access to our farmers, and it is inevitable we do it.
Sure.
And I think we need to set this right, and I think we need to depoliticize the process of land acquisition, to my mind. And it's important that we are able to make it a far more simple process, which is to the benefit of our own farmers and which is to the benefit of our country in terms of creation of better infrastructure. And I think if the central government has done this, to my mind, it's necessary that the central government sorts it out. But if it is not happening, then you need to just unleash it through the state, through the enterprise of the states, and allow the states to compete with each other, because the states want to move forward. The center shouldn't be holding back the states. And I think we just need to move forward. We are losing too much time. If India needs to grow at rates of 9 to 10%, we are losing too much time.
Because there is a view that it's a state subject, land is a state subject, just as labor law is a state subject. And just as Rajasthan introduced some changes in the labor laws, which were subsequently cleared by the president.
No, but
can a similar process be adopted for land acquisition by some states?
Then if land is a state subject, which is what my belief is, then the center should not have enacted such a law. Having enacted such a law, you've created a mess for all the states. Now, you need to set it right. If you're not able to set it right, then you allow the states to move forward. But I think we need to quickly do it so that trunk infrastructure can move forward.
Trunk infrastructure move forward.
We need to get the drain. I mean, you can't build a country without drainage, without sewage. How can you build a country without highways?
Sure.
How can you build a country without freight
In this
corridor?
context, let me come back to, I had interviewed you earlier on Rajya Sabha TV when you were heading the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor project, and that's a kind of infrastructure project cutting through states. And as you said, that will actually reduce the cost of doing business in terms of your goods landing at the ports and then being transported to the factories and then transported back after value add for export. Is that coming up on time? Is that keeping it deadline? The Delhi Mumbai.
No, fortunately, the freight corridor land had been acquired, so that
during your time, during the earlier government.
So the dedicated freight corridor will be there by 2018 beginning. Both the Delhi Mumbai freight corridor and the Chennai and the Amritsar Calcutta freight corridor. The 5 new cities for which land has been provided for by the state governments, those are coming up right now. So you'll have 5 new cities on the back of the Delhi-Mumbai corridor. But we are also doing the Chennai-Bangalore corridor. We are doing the Bangalore-Mumbai corridor. We are doing the Chennai-Vizag corridor.
So these are the big infrastructure projects.
These are large infrastructure projects, and we are facing huge amount of issues as far as getting the land is concerned. The state governments are finding it impossible to move forward. We have created bottlenecks for the states. I mean, states are not able to move forward. You've just tied up the hands of the state governments.
So therefore, it's very critical that the state governments are allowed to amend laws to suit their requirements.
Absolutely. The states want to move forward. The states want to grow at high rates. And if the Indian states grow at 10 to 11%, India grows.
Tell me, now coming back to foreign investment issues, because Make in India also has a huge foreign investment component, especially in defense and high-tech areas, where there may not be very high employment level, but then those technology is very important. Now, IPR has been a big issue. When Obama was here, American corporations, both Prime Minister Modi and Obama met Indian and American CEOs, and this was one of the big sticking points. And as you said, if India wants to go globalize, it will have to follow certain practices which are in sync with global practices. So, are we looking at reviewing our IPR practices, or what is the stage at which the IPR reforms are at present?
First of all, Venu, let me clarify that India is totally TRIPS compliant.
Yeah, okay.
Indian laws are totally TRIPS compliant.
That is true, yeah. Indian
Okay.
law, yeah.
Yeah, totally TRIPS compliant.
And we are also proud of some of the provisions that India introduced, which developing countries in general are benefiting from, especially on pharma.
Yeah, exactly. So, India, first of all, is extremely proud of its record in the intellectual property field.
Then why are the Americans complaining all the time then?
No. So, we have a provision of 3D which the American pharma companies do not like. Some pharma companies do not like. And the important thing important thing to understand is that the growth of Indian generic industry, generic pharma industry, has been largely a huge success stories across the world.
Yeah,
I mean,
Indian generic
pharma. It's the Indian generic pharma industry has penetrated global markets and has been able to supply medicine at cutting-edge prices. It has enabled medicine to reach people below the poverty line.
Supported by the Indian law and the global
Indian
regime,
law, absolutely. And one must understand that we are in a very vibrant democracy. If we are not able to provide medicine at the right price points, it will be very difficult for the government to survive. And therefore, provide medicine at the right price point is a very critical component and a commitment of this government. Now, when we talk, we are great believers in intellectual property. We aggressively believe in respecting this. There's been only one case of compulsory licensing in India that went right up to the Supreme Court.
And we won the
case. Won the case. Now, we've convinced now all the American pharma companies that they must understand the Indian democracy and that they must invest. And I'm very happy to tell you that in the last few years,
they've come around
and that India is actually evolved as a great R&D destination. You know, in the last 4 to 5 years, India has seen about 10,000 companies getting into R&D in India. Hyderabad and Bangalore have become some of the greatest places for R&D. They are employing close to about 500,000 Indians in Hyderabad and Bangalore. And today, India is a center for research and development for R&D has moved out of the head offices of the multinational corporations and relocated itself in India today.
So there's going to be no change in the compulsory licensing law, procedure as provided in the Indian laws, right? Then what are the IPR other issues that they are talking about?
We want our intellectual property regime to be absolutely the world's best regime, and therefore the government has constituted a very high-level task force headed by a very distinguished jurist to draft out a new intellectual property rights policy. That draft is ready. We've circulated it to different ministries. After the comments are received, we'll take it to the cabinet, and India will have a IPR policy for the first time.
Oh, for the first time?
Yeah.
And it will encompass everything?
All aspects.
All aspects?
All aspects of intellectual
including other technologies?
Yeah, absolutely.
Etc.
A very dynamic, vibrant IPR policy India will have.
Okay. Now, after talking to you, Amitabh, one gets the impression that it will take 3 years. You said 2017, the industrial corridor will happen by 2017. Then you said ease of doing business will also take about 2-3 years to bring India down to from 142nd rank to below 50. So do we take this to believe that by say 2017 end, this Make in India will really, the whole framework will be fully in place? Is that what you're suggesting?
Let me first say that a lot of things are happening. There's a huge energy, there's a huge vibrancy, there's a completely new dynamism. I mean, you must go and see some of the new investments that have happened in the country. You must go and see the new Daimler plant in Chennai. You must go and see the new facility of the General Electric, which is one of the world's best manufacturing facility in Pune. You must go and see the JCB plant in Rajasthan. These are all great manufacturing plants. You must go and see some of the unique manufacturing which is taking place in aerospace and defense manufacturing segments. Yeah, I mean, look at the Skiroski helicopter. Its cabin is entirely made here. Boeing parts, Airbus parts, they're all getting manufactured now by young entrepreneurs in India. So I see a huge, I mean, look at what we've done in defense. Taken out 60% of the items which are through the licensing process out. So I've seen a huge amount of process of manufacturing getting unleashed in India, and I see this on a continuous growth path. That's number one. Number two, a lot of work has been done on ease of doing business. We'll crack this, we'll deliver this, and I think India will radically improve its position. We'll bring it in the top 50. The work on infrastructure is presently on. We've done action plan for the states for 1 year and 3 years on of the different ministries for the Make in India. All ministries are implementing the action plan for the 3-year plan. All these are under the process of implementation right now. So I see a huge amount of action. Now there are legacy issues. There are legacy issues in terms of land acquisition, in terms of consistency.
This will take some time to resolve.
It will take some time. And to my mind, the direction is right. The course is absolutely perfect to my mind. We'll just need to provide it a bigger impetus, and we are on the right direction totally.
All the very best on all these initiatives of yours.
To my mind, we need to be absolutely optimistic about growth. India is an oasis of growth in the midst of a very barren economic landscape. We are growing at 7.5%. Our FDI is growing by 48%. It's unheard of. There's no room, no space for any pessimism at all.
Okay. Yeah, so all the very best for all your initiatives.
Thank you.
That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.